This is a video about how to start thinking about your portfolio, things you want to consider in terms of editing, pacing, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to actually show you an example of my portfolio. I'm a fashion and beauty photographer, so this is actually one of my beauty books. But a lot of the same issues that I am dealing with here would be the exact same for any sort of commercial portfolio, or for that matter, documentary portfolio. Now, fine art is slightly different, although many of the considerations will be the same, but when we get to the end of this video, I will actually talk about the differences between how you might think doing this for a fine art portfolio as opposed to a more commercial oriented portfolio. So at any rate, this case, I've got a slipcase, but this is how my portfolio actually works. So pulls out, it's a slipcase that's a protective part of it. It's all black leather. The black leather is part of my branding. It's the way I actually see and present I think about presenting my work. Anyway, leather, so leather slipcase, leather cover on this. When you open this up, the first thing you need to consider in doing a portfolio is that this should be treated like an art book. So the last thing in the world you want to have happen is that you don't want to actually open this book up and be hit with an image right away. That's not, it's just, you want to let people slowly work their way into your portfolio. So this is essentially a dust cover. It's just a regular piece of paper that's been printed to look like linen. So this is just a protective cover. You'll see this in any fine art book that's actually printed. So again, that's the way you should be thinking about presenting your work. So this opens up, and inside that, this becomes the first sort of opening page here, the first amount of information. So you'll see it's Verser Engelhardt Photography. It's important that you actually have some indication of what it is that you actually do, because there are a lot of times, there's cases where you're going to have to drop a portfolio off and leave it with someone, and you're not going to be meeting with them, that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that when they're looking at you through your book, that they don't all of a sudden make a mistake and think, oh, is this person a photographer? Is this person a hair and makeup artist? Is this person a stylist? Is this person an art director? I mean, who is it? So anyway, that's why I actually have not only my name, but actually what I do, small little logo, and that is it. There's no contact information that happens on this first page. All of that would happen at the very end of the book. So then the next page that we actually get to, we're going to come across, is the opener for me. So typically right-hand pages carry a lot more weight than left-hand pages. And the reason that is that as you start to lift this page open like this, you are already looking at this image before you actually begin to see this side. So a lot of magazines actually will even charge a premium for the a placement on the right-hand side here. So it's something to consider when you're laying out your portfolios, that in a spread, when we're looking at something here, I'll show you the next spread here, right here. When we're looking at this here, the way that this image is done is that there is less image content that is important here. This is really the most important part. But because this page already carries a visual premium, the two balance each other out. So anyway, it's just something to keep in mind and to think about. So the next thing I want to talk about in thinking about the portfolio here is stories. So in a fashion book, or in a beauty book, or in a commercial book, you want images that actually connect and that reinforce each other. So I'm going to take you through my portfolio here just a little bit to show you what it is I'm actually talking about. So in this, I've got a single image. This is actually from the same beauty story that's happening right here. And these two images alone represent 3 pages. So you've got a single page here, page 2, page 3 here. That is really the minimum that you want to have that would actually illustrate a story. Now this is going to go on, and there's a connection, somewhat of a connection here. I mean, the mere fact that it's beauty, it gives some connection in here. But what you'll see in here is that then as I get into this story, again, I've got now 1 page, 2 pages. I've got 3 pages, 4 pages. So this again is building a story. These images, this image right here is reinforcing these images right here are reinforcing this. And all of this part actually can lead me into this as I'm going through my book. So what I'm thinking about here is the number of images that build a story, and then the transitions that go from one into the next. So again, I've got darker images here that are actually leading into this same sort of like tonal structure in this. as I continue to go through my portfolio, I'll continue to explore those same sorts of things. But then again, I don't want to do something that carries on too long. I've sort of explored this darker story here, but then I actually do a break, and the break is going to happen right here. Now, this is actually a lot of cross-processed imagery, so it's in real stark contrast to what's going on in this part of my book right here. This part of my book right here is, again, darker, moodier. This is actually, boom, in your face kind of thing. It's important when you think about doing a portfolio that you want your portfolio to have a dynamic to it. You want it to be, as somebody is going through it, that there are moments where they're just, where they're surprised. And it's like, oh, I've shifted from this. It's just, so to tonally go from this to this is a jump. And that actually keeps people, that lends a dynamism to this whole portfolio. And so anyway, it's something to actually keep in mind in doing that. Don't hesitate to mix up color and black and white, those sorts of things. So anyway, that would be just something to also keep in mind when you're thinking about laying your portfolio out. So as I continue to go through this is starting moving into, this is a little bit more editorial part that's happening here in the beginning, but now I'm moving more into my more commercial beauty work here. It still has enough of an editorial edge, but again, it's a little bit less. And then even more so here. So I'm moving into even, these actually were real commercial ads for beauty here. But it's also setting me up, skin obviously is a very important thing in beauty, and so this is a way to sort of begin to explore that part of it as well. And so as I continue to work my way through my book, this is almost done on this one. Again, I'm still working here in stories in terms of content and in terms of number of images. We're going to talk about the actual true number of images and laying stuff out in just a second. But I wanted to just show you sort of, again, the constructive part of a portfolio, of a real one, as opposed to something being so theoretical or without images, just sort of like drawn out. So I get to the end of my book right here, and as this is going to be my final image on this page, as I flip across here, this is where you actually put your content. So in this case right here, it's got my name, it's got my email address, it's got my website, it's got my contact phone number, agency, wrapping agency is all this stuff right here. Again, you'll see that your book ends the same way it began. Here I've got that same, again, dust cover, that then this closes, and inside the back of my book is where I tuck in my promotional pieces. So a quick thing I'll say about promotional pieces, what I typically do with mine is, if you're seeing somebody in person, then you'll see right off the bat what they're interested in. About, you should note, which of these, and again, which of these that they would actually take. So if they're taking something like this, I know that they're looking for something slightly edgier. If they're doing something like this, maybe a little less so. Anyway, it just will inform you, depending on whatever promo piece that they take of yours. If you have to leave your book and you do not have, you're not going to be one-to-one on somebody, the trick that I always did when I would do that is I would put like 3 or 4 copies of each one of these cards, or a whole number of cards. So sometimes I'll do 3 or 4 or 5, 6 different cards in here. Depending on my fashion book, I'll do actually more than I will do typically with a beauty. But then I'll do 3 or 4 copies of each one, and I actually count how many of each card that I'm sending, so that when I get my portfolio back, I can then count through them again and find out what, if any, card they actually kept, which one, how many, any of that kind of stuff. It just will sort of help inform you and give you some idea, and that idea is important because then you keep notes about that. You say, okay, well, yeah, this person actually grabbed this card. That was the only one they took. So I know that next time going back into seeing them, that I want to skew my book to favor more the kind of things that I was exploring here in this, maybe than I was in some of my other stuff here. So it's just a way to think about treating your book and dealing with your book. And then again, when this closes up, that's it. So we're going to start talking about now actually layout, story, number of pages, how you want to order and pace your book, and that kind of stuff. Before we start looking at the actual layout process, I want to bring a little clarity to what I mean when I speak about stories. So stories can be anything that connects a group of pictures together. So it can't be a narrative, beginning, middle, and end, but it can also be, especially I think of in fashion stories, it can be the color red, it could be leather, it could be So in when we get into this conversation about doing layouts, and I'll keep talking about story, what I'm really looking for are groups of images that connect to one another, that reinforce one another, that have common elements, common aspects about them, that make it seem like a cohesive 3 to 5 images. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so now we're going to actually take a look at trying to think about what really truly makes a story. Again, regardless of whether you're doing a physical print book or you're going to do an electronic digital book, or you're going to, this actually can inform how you lay out and pace your website, all the above. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. So we've already talked about looking at the portfolio, the physical example, the one I just showed you. So in this case, if you think about it, we would start with basically here, just a single image. This would be the cover of the book. And then again, as you open your book up here to a spread here, this would be the dust cover here, and then the next page would actually be where you have your name and what you do, and then the next page becomes your first image. So this would be the way the whole process would actually begin. So, but I'm going to come in now and actually just change this. So I'm going to imagine that we've actually gotten into where the images start. So I'm going to start with our first spread right here. And typically you would do a single image here. Now, you could do a spread here, that is a possibility, but typically the way and this certainly is informed by fashion, the way fashion would actually do this is that typically, again, because the right page carries so much more weight than the left page here, you really want to start out with a bang. So I start with a single image here, and then I go to my next spread here, and I could do image here, and then I could actually do a third spread here, and do image here and image here. So in this case, you can see I have 5 possible images. Again, it's 5 pages here, but I'm going to put a single image on each page for the time being right now. So this would be my first option in this. So what this shows me is how many images that I feel like will actually make up a story. Now in this case, once you've given somebody 5 images to look at, the story is over. You don't need to continue to show them stuff. People get bored. You need to move on and change something. So in thinking about your portfolio, the maximum number of images that you want to think about for a story is going to be 5. And again, this applies for any commercial sort of photography, food, fashion, beauty, architecture. It doesn't matter what it is. But I would also include documentary in this. Again, if you're showing your doc work, this is 5 images should be enough to give somebody a sense of the story that you're actually trying to tell. It may not be the entire piece, but again, you want to show multiple pieces of multiple stories. Not anyway. So 5 images is the max in this scenario for me. This is what I would say that you need to think about here. So I'm going to do 5 images are my max. But this does not have to stay like this. I'm going to do an alternate version of it right down here. It's also possible that you could do this. Again, I'm going to start out with that single image again, and then I'm going to do my next 2 spreads here, but I am not going to do a single image on both pages. I'm going to do 2 full spreads here. So these would be horizontal images that spanned across the entire thing. This, in my opinion, is the minimum of number of images that you can have to have a story. 2 images, it's possible. I feel like you're stretching it a little bit, but 3 images should be, again, more than enough to tell a story. So at this stage of the game, it occupies the same amount of space here, but what you'll see here is that now I've got 3 images would be my minimum. So what I want everybody to think about in doing this work is that you're looking for stories that are primarily laid out in 3 to 5 images. Again, no fewer than 3, no more than 5 here to actually make up your story. Now, this applies to the opener of your book and the closer of your book. We'll look at your book that in just a second. This does not apply to the spreads now that go in between those two stories. So the opening story, because I've got this single page right here, it actually gives me that fifth image, but that's not going to happen now once I get into my book. So again, I'm going to erase this second option just so that we've got room and I can show you what I'm talking about. So at this stage of the game, I am going to start off with my 5 images. I'm also going to erase this part right here so that we can work down on the book further. All right, so then I go from this to my next story, which will now be made up of 2 spreads like this. And so in this case, what you end up having here again is 4 images, a possibility. The alternate for this is that you could also do this. It doesn't have to be 4 images like this. It could be, I'm going to do another set of spreads. It could be 2 images here and a full spread here. So again, this is falling in my both of these layouts right here are staying within my my 3 to 5 image limit here. So this would be a 4 image story. This would be a 3 image story right here. So again, it's continuing to think that way about things. And then finally, when I get to the end of my portfolio, again, in most cases, what I would do is I would come out and end this in 1, 2, 3, 4 images. It is possible that you could actually have one more spread at the end, but I think it leaves things hanging. So I would always end on a full spread like this. I wouldn't do this first one. So the 5 image part really can only be your opener, where this whole thing starts. 4 spreads, 4 image spreads that then make up the whole rest of your story until you wind up and end up out of the book. So that would be the way that I would actually be thinking about doing this. So in terms of the number of stories that you do, the people talk about the number of images that you do in a portfolio, and this is where things are going to be different for a fine art portfolio as opposed to the commercial version. In the commercial version, what we're really looking for is the images in the story, they need to reinforce one another. That's what this whole thing is about. A lot of times photographers will have an image that they absolutely love. It's the best thing that they've ever done in the whole wide world, whatever, but they don't have another image that is even remotely similar to that. You can't use that image in your book. The only thing that you can do in that scenario is say to yourself, okay, I need to continue to make other work to then support that single image that I love so much, the one that's the best in the world, so that you can get it into your portfolio. But without that, you have just a collection of random images in your book, and there is no rhyme or reason or theme to this. Whatever, it simply doesn't work. So at any rate, in talking about the number of images that you would do in a story for people who are doing a commercial book, either fashion, beauty, again, food, any of that kind of stuff, whatever, I don't think about the number of images as much as I think about the number of stories. And so what I would say in this is that a solid portfolio would be 7 to 10 stories. So if we did, say, 3 images for every single story and you only had 7 stories, that would be 21 images. If we did the max, and you're never really going to get 5 in all of this, but if we did the max and you're saying 10 stories at 4 each, whatever, you're around 40 to 50 pages, all right? Not necessarily images, but 40 to 50 pages. For a commercial book, this whole range feels good to me. That's where I would actually be. Where this changes for a fine art portfolio, though, is this. Fine art doesn't necessarily work in stories like this. Now, you can have fine art that is connected, certainly, but what I would suggest doing if you're going to do a print book for fine art, well, you have 2 options. Number 1 is that you can do a print book. The number 2 is that you can actually do loose prints in a box. There are portfolio cases that are designed to actually do that. But what I would consider doing for a fine art portfolio in a book, and I actually like the book better than loose prints. And the reason I like a book better than loose prints is that if the order, the sequence of looking at that work matters to you, it is impossible to do that with loose prints in a box, because people will actually start to take prints out. They'll either stack one on top of another or flip ones over. It just gets shuffled. And unless you are going to resort your book between every single person who sees it, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to force that order. You're not going to be able to force the sequence that you want. But in a portfolio, a bound portfolio, you can actually do that. So this is what I would do. It would start out the exact same way. So again, I'm going to do, this would be the cover of your book, and then this would be the first part of your book, the opener. And again, this is a dust cover right here. And then the next part of your book right here, this would actually be where your name and contact, Verser Engelhard, fine artist. And then the next page right here, this would be right here, your first image. Then in your next spread, you only do single images. So in your next spread, and you only do them on the right-hand side. You pick the side that's actually got the most power to it. And so every single spread that you're doing right here now is only a single image. That really lets this image, it gives a lot of negative white space, but it leaves this image to really sort of like breathe on its own. It's unlike in the commercial book where we're really looking to have images reinforce one another. In this case, you're really trying to isolate them as a single piece of art by itself. So in this case, in doing a portfolio like this, I think that, again, you'll hear a lot people talk about the sort of 15 to 20 image at the end of the day, which would, again, if we're doing 20 images and you're talking about spreads for every single one of these, you're going to end up with 40 pages in your book to hold 20 images, or actually a little bit more because of the content and the dust covers and that kind of stuff here. So that would be the difference that I would deal with in terms of approaching this for a fine art portfolio. The other thing to mention in all of this is that the whole sequencing that we're doing in here, we're going to talk about sequencing in just a second, actually how I would suggest that you do it. This also can inform your website. There's some people that would make the argument that you should have a website that is completely different than your portfolio. I firmly disagree with that. I actually think that the portfolio and a website should be very closely related to one another. So in one of the advantages of doing a portfolio, actually there's a couple, but one of them is that it actually informs the sorting and the ordering that you can use for your website. The other is that it can help you narrow down the number of images that are in your website, because people typically use way more than they should be using. Again, you need to keep your website dynamic and exciting. You don't want to just show them 15 of the same kind of work, images of the same thing. It'll bore people to death. So anyway, you don't want to do that part. So at any rate, that's how I'm going to approach this part. And then we're now going to actually look at the way that I would then cull my images, the way that I sort of like lay out what I think I want and try to force it into this sort of container. Again, the discipline that you will come from actually having to put your images into this sort of like thinking about this sort of like layout, whatever, really helps you narrow and focus, and then also think about the transitions from one story to the next. The final piece of the puzzle here is how do you actually consider laying out your book, editing your book, trying to make sure that you've got the sequencing in the order, the number, the pacing, everything that you want in that. So the way my suggestion is always, this is the way I've always done mine, and it works amazingly well, is that I want you to print out every single thing, every single image that you would possibly consider for your portfolio. But do small prints. You can actually see this by the size of my hand. This is a 4x6 print, something close to that. They don't have to be much larger than that. You should do them in color. They don't need to be, they don't need to be really super expensive done, that kind of stuff. You can do them at Walgreens, or for that matter. They'll be more than adequate for the sorting process, the stuff that we're trying to do here. So anyway, print out everything that you possibly want and then lay it out in groups. So you can see I've got one shooting that's going right here, and then I've got a second one that's happening right here. So this was how I'd lay it out here in the beginning. And then the thing that you should do, or at least the thing that I'm going to do, is that because the opening of my portfolio can actually contain 5 images or 5 pages, that's a better way of thinking about it. It's not necessarily images. So again, we're going to do that 3 to 5. That's going to be our target to here. That's what I'm going to try to actually do in this scenario right here. So in this top row right here, you've actually got a series of images, and there's no repeats in this either. Every single one of, I take it back, this and this are the same outfit right here. This is unique, that's unique, and this is unique. These 3 right here are also the same outfit. So I have to pick one, and what I'm looking for in here is variety. I want to have, we've already talked about this, mentioned this earlier in the video, about having your book have a sort of a dynamism to it, a dynamic to it, that as somebody's going through it, that things are changing, that things are happening. So what I want is that I want to actually push and pull my viewer in and out of my images. So for instance, I can start here something that's very, very close, and then immediately drop to something that's full length and even further. So you get this sort of like push pull that's happening in the experience of the book. The single worst portfolio I ever saw in my whole life was it was a portfolio of a guy. He had like 40 pages. He was a portrait photographer, and every single page was the exact same scale, the exact same focus, the exact same crop, the exact same background, the exact same lighting, and it was just page after page after page, and it was like nothing except the facial features changed in the entire thing. It was just the most monotonous book that you can possibly imagine. I want this experience to be something that's again dynamic, that brings you in, pushes you out, goes from black and white to color, back to black. I mean, not that you have to do black and white. It's just that you need to be thinking about keeping an energy in the experience of actually looking at your portfolio. So for me, the thing that I suggest people start with is what's your favorite story? What is the favorite images that you've got? That's actually what should open up your book, because it's the stuff that you're the most excited about. It's also the only place that you can actually really get to using 5 images. So that's where I'm going to start. So in my case, because I do a lot of beauty as well, I am actually going to start with a headshot here. That's where I'm going to go. And then I need to think about this. So now basically the rest of the images that I've got are all single pages, so there's no spreads that are going to actually happen in this part. There will be possibly later down in this group, but not in this part right here. So right off the bat, I know that I've got a single image I know I'm going to pick. That means if I'm going to stick to my 5 image maximum rule, I've got 4 other images that I can possibly use. And you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images here. So that tells me I need to lose 3 of these. Now, it's indeed possible that I could say I love the fact that these 2 images, even though they're the same outfit, that I could actually keep these together. If I think that this is stronger than something else that's going on in here, I might want to do that. Same thing for this image is right here. The fact that it's the same outfit, but one's sort of in and the other sort of like pulled out. I sort of like the vibe of that. So I could consider doing those tricks in all of this. Again, that's kind of up to you. But so for me, I'm going to actually keep this image. It's the only single back image that I've got here. And I really like this part here. So I'm going to pull this guy out for the time being right now. And I'm going to set this right here. And again, I'm thinking about the stronger image so that as I go from this page open, that this is what I hit right here. So I like that part of it quite a bit, actually. Then I'd sort of like this as a possible spread, so I might continue to do that part. If not, I need to really look down here. And the thing I like about this is that that there's a lot of, there's a really dynamic pose in here. I want to keep this image right here. And I really like this one. It's the only profile that I've got in the group. So I'm going to lose this image. So that gives me down to, I've now got 1, 2, 3 images. That means that I actually can keep 2 more images in here. That's all I can do. Now I said I really like this image right here. So for me, I'm actually going to keep this guy. I don't think I like this second one after it, so I'm going to actually pull this one out as well. And I kind of like this 2 together. I sort of like this, the fact that they are both at this focus and scale. So I'm going to keep this guy right here. And I'm going to keep these 2 right here as well. So for me, I then think this is my 5 images. That means I have to lose this. And now I may love this image. If you really love an image so much that you're thinking, oh my God, I can't take it out of my book, you should consider making this a promo piece. This could be a leave behind here, so that would be something to consider. So at any rate, this is now actually how I'm going to sort of begin and lay out my book. And I like this part. I might flip this spread to here, and I might flip this one to here. It all depends on where I want to go next, because what I need to think about now is to transition out of this into this down here. And if you're wondering why these are all on green, it's because I composite all this stuff. So I shoot on green screen, and then a different background gets put in on all this. So at any rate, so that's where I'm at now. So in my next grouping right here, this is an interior spread. I only have 4 pages that I can work with here. So in the context of this, I've got 3 separate outfits right here. I need to think about how I'm actually going to do this. So having 3 images that I can work into 4 pages, it sort of allows me to do a spread if I want to do a spread. And in looking at these images right here, I sort of like what's going on in this single image right here. So I'm going to keep this as a spread, but that means I lose these 2. Then in looking at the other things that I've got going on here, because I liked this image and I picked it first, it sure kills this one because it's a very similar pose. It's also would be horizontal here. So I'm going to kill this guy as well. And for that matter, it also tells me that I need to lose these 2 here because I do not want to do 2 spreads and just have that. That is not a story that's where images are reinforcing each other. So it means I lose these 2 as well. And now it leaves me down to this. And the question is, do I like this image better or do I like this image better? Now, in looking at my portfolio, I've got a little bit of eye contact in here. This is a little bit off right here. So I don't mind the eye contact here. There's something I really sort of like about this image, but I think actually I'm going to go more with this guy right here. So this is how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to kill this guy right here. So this is my 4 pages. And again, to see what I'm talking about in 4 pages, not that I would run the spread down, the gutter of the book down the middle. I would actually throw it off to the side like this. So this is going to be my spread. So now I've got to ask myself, what do I do to come out of this into this story right here? And for me, the whole sort of like exaggerated arm part out here actually fits into this image really well. This transitions into that, I think, really well. It's the same sort of, hand gesture, that kind of stuff, whatever. So I like that part about this. I like it better than this. Even though this is a scale change, and I could go with the scale change, I like that part as well. And then the color part here throws me off a little bit. I mean, this would work, but I wouldn't jump into color like this. That doesn't seem to actually go for me. Also, I don't like the fact that they are both looking in the same direction, both those same profiles. So if I really decided that this was the image that I want, I would probably flip this before I actually printed it out for my book, just to sort of break up that, geez, what's over to the right-hand side for all of that. I would also consider possibly doing that here, only because typically you don't have people looking at the gutter of a portfolio, so this would probably also get flipped in the other direction. I would certainly play with that as I was laying out my book and thinking about doing it. But at any rate, like I said, I really like the whole way that this gesture, actually this thing, begins to work with this image right here. And then these 2, so again, in thinking about this, right-hand page has more power than the left-hand page. So for me, I'm actually going to take it like this. And this would be the beginning of my portfolio. So again, thinking about this is my 5-page starter, and then this is my 4-page spread, and then I would continue on from there. So again, doing these prints out like this really gives you the ability to sort, and then to edit, and then to edit first, and then sort these in terms of how they're going to work their way through your portfolio. So that's it.